Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to In the Office with Scott and Wallace. I'm Robert Scott.
Clint Wallace. Happy Tuesday, everybody.
As you can see, we're outside and we're standing facing Monroe Street here at our Tallahassee office. And as you observe all the cars going by, today we're going to talk about what each one of those people are doing behind the steering wheel. And are they paying attention or are they distracted?
Okay.
So distracted drivers, Clint. Talk about that's a big thing in our practice.
Big term. It's we get a lot of car accident cases. Most of the cases that we deal with are car accident cases, and lots of times in investigating those, we see that the reason the accident happened was because the driver that caused it was distracted for some reason. Right. Texting on the phone, eating on the radio, just a whole myriad of reasons that a person can be distracted.
Drinking and driving. Impairment is very common, obviously,
Sure.
and when, of course, if an accident happens and there's a suspicion that someone may be impaired because they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, then the investigating officer will likely conduct a DUI investigation, which can involve field sobriety exercises.
Sure.
And if the suspected impaired driver fails those, then he or she may be asked to submit to a breathalyzer.
Sure.
And in more serious accidents, we've run into this. There's actually something called a legal blood draw.
Okay.
Where if someone is seriously injured in an accident and the other driver who caused the accident may be suspected of being, as I said, being under the influence of alcohol or drugs, then under the law, they can be compelled to submit to a legal blood draw where actually a nurse would take blood and then that's analyzed. And that's actually, Glenn, the most accurate way to test it, right?
Sure. Absolutely. I was working on the trucking case this morning where that happened, where there was a death in the case, unfortunately. And so it's a federal motor carrier safety administration law. They have to take a blood draw within 12 hours so they can see if the driver was intoxicated or not.
Yeah.
So that happens. So what are some ways we find out that the driver of the car that caused the accident was impaired or was distracted?
And you guys, really quick, y'all have the person with the loudest radio right beside you.
Yeah, they might.
Hopefully they're not distracted. No, I mean,
do y'all want to just pivot this way a little
sure.
bit?
We like theme music for our videos too. There,
right.
So.
No, but as Clint was hitting on, and there's actually been studies, and we've talked a little bit about this, but texting and driving, there's been some studies that have been completed by NHTSA and other organizations that show that texting is actually as bad as drinking and driving.
Yeah, right.
And so, if there's suspicion, like we get hired and we think that the at-fault driver may have been texting or on the phone some other way, what we can do is we can subpoena. Once we file a lawsuit, we can subpoena that person's cell phone records.
Right.
And you can't argue with those.
You cannot.
So
they can triangulate it through the towers and show exactly where you were and when the text or the phone call came through and the duration, the number, so we can see who you called,
right.
Who you texted at the time. So yeah, you can't hide from that data.
Right. So that's something we do in every car accident case we litigate.
Sure. Another thing that we do is lots of people don't know that inside most newer cars, I'd say 2012 or 2013, and more recent cars, more current cars, there's an electronic control module that downloads a lot of activities that the car is doing. And it's triggered by an event being a collision that causes a change in the delta force, lets the computer know to save that data. And so lots of times we can download that data and we can see exactly, it typically goes for 7 or 8 seconds before the accident, if the radio was on, if the speed of the car, when the brakes were depressed. You can get a whole lot of information that way. And actually, sometimes we even hire engineers to take that data and they can recreate everything that happened in the accident.
Right.
Wow.
Downloading the airbag modules and
whether the blinker was on,
ECMs and trucks and stuff. So yeah, it shows like the last before an impact. It can show like the last several seconds before the impact, and you can actually see what the driver's doing.
Sure.
Which goes into perception and reaction, but that's a little different. But
sure.
But yeah, so there's a lot of information to be had. Obviously, witness statements. If you mentioned, it was interesting. You mentioned whether you're eating or something. I mean, people. It's just part of it. People get food to go. Drive-throughs at every fast food restaurant, and they're eating and driving. You want to be mindful of that because if you drop a French fry and reach down to pick it up, you can cause an accident.
Yeah,
And in fact, we had a case a couple years ago where, remember the pictures we got out of the case? The Burger King was all in the floorboard.
Yeah.
And so we knew that the driver who caused that accident had been eating during
Right.
that critical moment. And it was a bad accident, bad injury. So it was just something else to keep in mind.
Another thing that we see that's more common now, especially with the rise of Uber and Lyft and all the rideshare services, is lots of those drivers put cameras in the front of their car and they're taping continuously. And I bet we get one a month where our client was injured and they actually have the video of the accident happening, which we never used to get before.
Right.
And so,
and you know, a lot of times, you know, it doesn't make sense to get into this level of investigation, but you know, if you're in an accident and thank goodness you're not, you know, critically injured and you're able to speak to the investigating officer, you know, we've had clients tell us, well, as soon as the other driver got out of the car, he or she was on his or her phone.
Sure.
Okay, and you go ahead and tell that to the police officer. Now, people, you know, in their accident, it makes a lot of sense. They may call their loved one or spouse or something and say, look, I've been in an accident, let them know where they are and what's going on. That makes a lot of sense. But as we've been talking about, if it becomes a point of debate, we can subpoena those records and find out if that person was actually making a call right after the accident or was on the phone during the accident and was, in fact, distracted while driving.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, so that's a very interesting topic and one that's very important to what we do for a living and what we do to help our clients in investigating cases. And so if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to ask us.
Yeah.
Did you already cover exactly what somebody would do if they thought that they, you know, had been hit by a distracted driver, like at the point in time that happens?
Yeah, I mentioned, you know, you want to communicate that to the investigating officer.
Okay.
And that the officer, you know, may make a note in the report. You hope that the officer would do that. We've seen that in reports. The officer, I mean, there's something called accident report privilege, and a lot of things that happen during the investigation is not admissible at trial, but it gives us a jumping off point. And when an officer memorializes something in a report, like, you know, that he was informed that the other driver was on the phone, that at least, you know, helps clue us in. That may be something we want to look at, especially if, you know, it involves a, you know, serious injury or something, and our client didn't get a chance to talk to the officer.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so.
All right. Well, I hope you guys are watching at home and not while you're driving. But if you have any questions, contact us anytime, 222-7777. We're always happy to answer any questions that you have, and there's no charge to talk to us.
Yep, and if you would rather have us have different theme music, just put your suggestions in the comments, and maybe we can add that next time.
All right, guys. Well, happy Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.